characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism.
What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm going to talk about the Jimmy Kimmel situation and if it's a win or not. I know a lot of people are happy that he's getting fired because Jimmy Kimmel sucks. He's absolute garbage. He was laughing at people during COVID for not getting the vaccine. He mocked President Trump for getting kicked off of Twitter when Trump was the president. So Jimmy Kimmel, in my personal view, is a garbage person, a garbage American, a garbage journalist. I think he's just absolutely horrible. But the question is this a win? So before I give you guys my opinion and my take on it, I'm going to ask the early people that are here on the live stream, let me know in the comment section, do you think this is a win? And I'm going to read some audience opinions before I give mine so that it is not interfering with yours at all. So let me know. Dream Rare Podcast starts now. Thanks for being here.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yeah.
What's going on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble? Although I don't think I can see the Rumble comments, I apologize. If you're early here on YouTube or Facebook, we have a couple hundred people. Let me know in the comment section. Is it a win? Do you think Jimmy Kimmel getting kicked off the airwaves? Let's see. We got Chelsea on YouTube. She said win for sure. Daniel said win. $500 fine said not winning. Giovanna said yes, beat them at their own game. Eddie said not really a win. He'll be up and running again. Very early. What is a win? It's a win. Now, so I think most people are saying win. Some people are saying not win. Let's see. Someone said yes, they fired Roseanne Barr. It's a win for both sides. Rockshot said win. So I'll play the clip real quick because I have it right here. And I guess let's just play the clip, okay? And I apologize. I know I'm probably going to annoy some people because let me just get this out of the way so I don't piss everybody off because it's going to be a long kind of route to what I really think. But I don't like Jimmy Kimmel. I don't care about him. I don't care about television media. My reasons for thinking, me personally, I don't think it's some sort of massive win. And I'm going to get to that reason very soon, but it's not for the reasons that people think. And I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I don't think it's a win, but it's not because I care about Jimmy Kimmel or television media or this sort of thing. I just think we'll get to it, but let's play this clip first.
He had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism.
So that's what he said. Once again, I really hate to be that guy because I'm not defending Jimmy Kimmel. I don't really care what happens to him as far as his career on television. I don't care that he got fired. I'm not some sort of, I would say, person that just says, oh, well, he did this and that. But just to be clear from that video, and this is me despising Jimmy Kimmel, he didn't say he was 100% sure that MAGA was the shooter. He just said MAGA's trying to pretend like the shooter isn't anything but one of him. Of course, he's hinting towards that. Of course, that's what he's hinting. But I don't think he flat out said the shooter was MAGA like everybody said. He just said, MAGA's trying to pretend like this shooter was everything that he wasn't. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to play the second half of the clip because he's just mocking Trump because Trump had a weird reaction to it. But my thoughts are this, and I'm not going to act like this is where the Trump administration is going. But what I've seen on social media is people saying, Jimmy Kimmel is saying that MAGA is what, the shooter is MAGA. That's not literally, you can watch the clip again. He didn't say that, but he definitely hinted towards that. With that being said, now do we have to agree with what the government said and Kash Patel said? Now we have to say, well, it's exactly what Kash Patel, the shooter is exactly who he is. Of course, I don't think the shooter is MAGA. Of course, it's a low blow. Of course, I hate Jimmy Kimmel. I don't care that he got fired. I'm not going to grandstand and say that he should be there. I don't care. I don't care whether the network took him down. Even if the FCC guy's being a hypocrite, I don't necessarily care on this topic. I'm just being completely clear the narrative going around is basically, well, Jimmy Kimmel questioned who the shooter was, and it's not that. So are you not allowed to say that the shooter had help? Are you not allowed to say that Kash Patel's lying? Not saying they're going to go there, because with television media, this is my opinion, by the way. I'm sorry, I'm doing a long-winded route, and I know people are going to get pissed off, but I don't think it's a win, not because I care about Jimmy Kimmel or what Trump's doing. It's just, it's old media. It's television media. Nobody cares about Jimmy Kimmel. Nobody cares about the TV. New media is being formed currently, and it's essentially big tech taking over these old networks and turning them into subscription models. CBS Paramount was just recently bought by Larry Ellison's son. If you guys don't know Larry Ellison, I believe he's pretty close to Donald Trump. Most Trump supporters are not huge fans of Oracle or Larry Ellison, but like with almost every topic, the gap between Trump supporters and Trump himself is enormous. So TikTok is now in the hands of, or is about to be in the hands of, a little group put together by Larry Ellison of Oracle and Andreessen Horowitz, some sort of venture capitalist fund. So now the guy who owns, Larry Ellison, a lot of the mass surveillance, and I think there's videos of him explaining that he thinks that people should be recorded all over the place and that police should be recorded when they're going to the bathroom. Like, he's got a lot of really weird clips that I've played before. But anyway, that guy is now not only in control of TikTok, he's about to get TikTok. And, not to be a buzzkill or anything, but TikTok was one of the platforms where a lot of the youth, albeit I don't agree with like anything a lot of the youth is doing, they were questioning Israel a lot. And then there was some sort of huge backlash on TikTok. They ended up hiring some former IDF person to censor content. And basically TikTok was under immense pressure from the United States, just like everything that the Democrats and Republicans do to stop criticism of Israel. Because if people haven't noticed yet, no offense, we live in the United States of Israel, where literally the Republican Party essentially sits down every day and figures out what they could do for Israel to stop U.S. citizens talking about Israel. But anyway, that already happened this year. An IDF or a former IDF member is in control of like monitoring censorship on TikTok. Now they're being forced to sell, which I'm not a fan of China, but who are they selling to? They're selling to Larry Ellison of Oracle. And Larry Ellison's son just put together some multi-billion-dollar deal to control CBS and Paramount. And Dana White just did a $7 billion deal with them. And Trump has been quoted several times saying that he's, working closely with that family. And, he's definitely not opposed to them taking over all the media. I say all this to say this. I'm not trying to be a buzzkill. I'm not trying to scare everybody. It's just, to me, what this does, and this is maybe not the take that people want, but it's not me necessarily defending Jimmy Kimmel, because I don't give a shit about him. It's not me standing on my high horse saying, well, we can't do what the left does, because to be honest, I'm past the point of giving a shit about that too. It's just me being honest about it. I believe it's kind of a spectacle that is being raised where the left is going to now pretend like they're the free speech people. You got Chuck Schumer, who tried to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. He's acting like he cares about free speech. Gavin Newsom, Lockdown Newsom, is sitting there acting like he cares about free speech. And then Republicans will say, well, you didn't care about us. And it creates this whole spectacle where, once again, not trying to be a buzzkill, not trying to like ruin people's parade, because I don't give a shit about Jimmy Kimmel. I think he's awful. But I don't think this ends his career in any sort of way. And I don't think it's going to stop him from starting a podcast or anything, nor do I want to. I don't care what Jimmy Kimmel says. I think he should be allowed to say that. I don't know the television rules, nor do I give a shit, because television is on its way out. So whether it is the FCC or it is ABC or it is Sinclair Media, I don't care. That's basically a dying breed. And the new model is the subscription model, and the new model is podcasting. So like I'm saying, the stakes on this are so low. It's like arguing over like, radio censorship. It's like nobody listens to the radio anymore. Who even cares? So that's my kind of opinion of it, without taking some sort of hard line stance. Like, we can't do what the left does because, that's not fair. That's not what I'm saying. I understand that there are libertarians and principled people who say that, and I think that that is fair. I'm not knocking people for saying that. I'm just letting people know my angle is this doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's just like the Epstein situation, which has everything to do with everything. You have the left pretending like they care. Adam Schiff is now some sort of truth teller, and Ted Lieu. They don't care about the Epstein files. The Republican media is right about that. The Democrats never cared about the Epstein files, and they still don't. But here's the thing. Just because the Democrats are lying and they don't care, now the Republicans are using it as a scapegoat to say, you never cared. Why didn't you do it during your term? because they're a bunch of phonies. But the thing is, most Trump supporters voted for Trump because they think he's not a phony. So my take, once again, on the Epstein files is I didn't expect Joe Biden to do it because I think Democrats and Joe Biden are complicit. Not necessarily Joe Biden himself per se, but I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I didn't vote for open borders. I didn't vote for vaccine mandates. If people vote for Donald Trump, they're voting to disclose the Epstein files. So it creates this perfect game where everybody's playing these gotcha moments where the left's playing gotcha on Epstein. They don't care. The right's saying, well, they don't care, which is true. But then they use it as a smokescreen to say, well, because you don't care, why should we care? Why should we do anything about it when you didn't do anything about it? That's kind of how I see this Jimmy Kimmel situation where, now the left and everyone's going to have these principled discussions about should the FCC be allowed to put pressure on Jimmy Kimmel? How did these corporations work? I believe TV media, I don't fully understand it because certain networks have certain licenses, and it's a weirder game than a podcast or just like a regular broadcast. They're playing by these weird rules. And to be honest, the rules have always been rigged. Like I said, excuse my language, but Jimmy Kimmel is a piece of shit. He's a total piece of shit. He was a piece of shit during COVID. He was a piece of shit during Trump's first term. He's a piece of shit now. He's just a garbage person. What he said about Charlie Kirk and the MAGA thing didn't offend me, but it's not funny. He's just such a dark, grimy, slimy guy. Like everything he says, the way he talks, he's just such a shitty person. So I don't care whether he's on television or not, but no one else even cared about whether he was in television or not. So what I'm trying to explain is now you have this left versus right thing, right? The left pretends they're free speech. They're not. The right pretends like they don't care now to get, retribution on Charlie Kirk because now they're doing what the left is doing. But once again, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily the worst thing in the world, but just pay attention to where Republicans go with this, because this is the big misconception, I believe, that a lot of people in MAGA and Republican Party, they think. They believe that it's the right versus the left, the Republicans versus the Democrats, the good guys versus the bad guys. So when the good guys get in power, they're going to go after the bad guys. I don't believe that. And I'm not saying that we can't take some wins. I'm not saying that Trump isn't doing anything good. And I think our job is to try to guide Trump in the right direction because Trump has so much pressure from donors and foreign countries that Trump, in my opinion, just listening to him talk over the last 2 months, I don't think he even has any power. He seems deflated. He seems like, I don't even think he can do anything. I think he's got so many tentacles wrapped around him that he's just completely powerless. He's basically just allowed to be there, build his ballroom. He keeps talking about his ballroom all the time. I'm building a ballroom. Do you know why? Because Trump likes to build. He's a builder, and he gets to build a ballroom. They say, Trump, you can't say anything here. You can't do this here. You can't implement your foreign policy. You're completely powerless. Go build a ballroom. And that's why Trump's talking about it, because it's the one thing he probably can do, and he's pretty happy about it. As for like implementing his actual agenda, I don't even think he's allowed to if he even wants to. But I say all this to say that I'm not asking people to play by the same playing field as the left or whatever. I'm not asking you to like Jimmy Kimmel or grieve the loss of him on social media or whatever, or a television show. He'll just get a podcast and be a piece of shit there. Who cares? But it's just, if you're looking at this like it's the Republicans versus the Democrats, I don't see it that way. I mean, obviously that's what it is to some extent, but the Republicans are not on our side. So as you're saying, well, they're saying this, where are they going to go with it? I'm not saying to freak out. I'm just saying pay attention to them. Because once again, what he said right here, I'm going to play the clip again. I have 2 issues with how they're freaking out about it. I don't care that he's off air. I like that they're putting a Charlie Kirk memorial. It shows the power of Charlie Kirk. He literally just basically deplatformed, a piece of shit, and now he gets a memorial. Like Charlie Kirk is crushing Jimmy Kimmel posthumously. But listen to what he said, and then think about what they're saying in the Trump administration. What is wrong with this?
He hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was
even though I despise him and I don't think the shooter is MAGA, technically, linguistically, I'm just being honest, nothing he said there was incorrect. He said, MAGA is trying to pretend that this guy was anything but them. That's a fact. Nobody in MAGA is pretending like the shooter was MAGA. Some people think it was a leftist. Other people are saying it's Israel, and they're all arguing on Twitter, right? It's factually true what he said. Nobody in MAGA he said, MAGA's trying to pretend like the shooter is anything but. Is he trying to suggest that the shooter's MAGA, or at least trick his audience into thinking the shooter's MAGA without saying it? Of course. And he sucks for that. But he didn't actually say the shooter is MAGA. He said MAGA's pretending like the shooter was anything but. Factually true. MAGA is pretending like the shooter is anything but not just pretending. Potentially, it's probably true. So, and then he said they're trying to score political points. Also true. Everyone is trying to score political points, as they probably should. But with that being said, like, what does this mean? I'm sure it's not going to mean really much, so I'm not going to freak out about it. But as far as like, you're not like, the FCC had a problem with that because they like Charlie Kirk. You're not allowed to say that MAGA is pretending that it's not that. Do you now have to agree 100% with what the FBI says? You just have to say, yeah, whatever the FBI says, that's who the shooter was. He didn't have any help. He was exactly this. I believe the text messages, and there's no way anyone else was involved, because that's what they say. And if you say otherwise, then now, you can be under the same weight. Once again, I don't work on television. I don't understand their rules. The FCC licenses, they play on a different playing field. That's why I'm not overwhelmingly concerned or anything. It's not like he has a podcast and the government removed him. I don't understand the television industry, and I do think they have to play by different rules. And the rules are garbage because every television network sucks. I don't care if the televisions turn off tomorrow and they never turn back on. I don't like Fox News. I don't like CNN. I don't like Jimmy Kimmel. There's really no one I like on television. The last person I liked on television was Tucker Carlson, and he got kicked off. So fuck television. I don't care. I don't care the rules. I don't care what the FCC said. I don't get it. I don't understand the game they're playing. It doesn't benefit me. I don't care if a television never worked again. With that being said, just keep your eyes on where they're going with this, because if they're trying to say, well, it's disrespectful to question the official narrative because Jimmy Kimmel did it, now we're going to start branching into other stuff. Just be aware of it. Not trying to scare people, not saying you can't celebrate a win if you do actually believe it's a win. But for me, it's like, I know who the Trump administration is. I know who they're working for. It's not America. Nearly Trump, his administration is so inherently wrapped in so many other things that I know exactly where they will try to go with this if people allow them, or at least if people aren't paying attention. It's not for American interests. Like, all you have to do is look at Pam Bondi. And if I had the full clip, maybe I should go try to find it. Pam Bondi is talking about hate speech when she's talking about Charlie Kirk. And I watched the full clip of it because everyone's like, oh, Pam Bondi's just talking about, she's just talking about violent speech. And violent speech is technically not speech because you're doing threats. That's what she said when everybody said she should be fired. If you go and find the full context conversation, she's talking about anti-Semitism. I actually saw the full clip and I was like, of course she is, because I know who Pam Bondi is and who she works for. But in general, in the full clip and in the full context of the whole podcast, she's complaining about anti-Semitism, which is the hate speech that she's talking about policing. And it's not my imagination that she's going to do that because that's all I think about. It's the reality of what she's already done. Major publications were complaining that Matt Gaetz would not police hate speech and that Matt Gaetz was an anti-Semite because he thought the IHRA anti-Semitism hate speech laws were hate speech laws, and he thought they were anti-Christian, which they are. So Matt Gaetz got replaced by Pam Bondi. I'm not saying that's why he did, but I do believe that had a lot to do with it. As soon as Pam Bondi gets there, the same newspapers that were calling Matt Gaetz an anti-Semite are now saying, oh, Pam Bondi is going to crack down on protesters. She's going to crack down on protesters. Because that's what she was hired to do. So she's been policing hate speech, not for America, not for Charlie Kirk, for Israel and one race and one religion. So when she talks about that sort of stuff, that's what she's doing. Mike Johnson just had a meeting yesterday to talk about it. Jared Moskowitz, I believe he's a Democrat, was talking to Kash Patel the other day about, I think it's called Section 230, the one that has like internet censorship and how to, maintain the internet conversation. And he's talking about anti-Semitism. And Kash Patel said to him, I'm willing to work with you on that. So I'm not hallucinating these things. I know that Trump's entire administration's in the bag for Israel. Their entire existence seems to be to police hate speech for Israel. So when they use Jimmy Kimmel as this scapegoat, first of all, Jimmy Kimmel was totally irrelevant, right? Nobody cared about him. He was culturally just completely irrelevant. And even if that video went viral, ABC has the right to fire him, or Sinclair. I don't care. But the thing is, when Trump and the government, I believe the FCC guy was kind of getting involved, but he's like, I'm not getting involved, but I'm getting involved. Why do you even have to do that? The public square will work for itself. People were going to get pissed off. He might have got fired anyway. Why even bring the government into it and give them something to say? Now they're making Jimmy Kimmel into some free speech martyr when yesterday he was the same piece of garbage he was 2 days ago. Like he's some sort of character where they're like, everyone's like, oh man, this is who he is. Not that I care what they say, but it's almost like you're helping the left. You're helping Jimmy Kimmel. You're not really doing anything as far as like, advancing our goals, because nobody even watches television anyway. And now it's giving justification for the hate speech that the Trump administration really wants to police, because they are policing it currently. It's not my thought that that's what they want to do. They are doing it. Every level of America is being rigged for Trump and his administration to police hate for Israel. They're rigging the visa process, that you can't get a visa or become a U.S. citizen if you break these international anti-Semitism hate speech laws. And one of the only politicians who knows they're doing that is Matt Gaetz. Go look at Matt Gaetz's X and Twitter. He sounds very similar to me now, because it's the reality of the situation. So anybody that ever talks about this stuff, they seem to back away from it quickly. Charlie Kirk talked about it a year ago for the first time. Then he never really talked about it again. Matt Walsh made a huge stink about it when the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Go watch Matt Walsh's video on it. He goes, this is ridiculous. This is insane. These speech laws are crazy. Yeah, well, they're being passed into almost every state on every level through executive order. And Pam Bondi is using that international definition that Matt Walsh pretended to care about a year and a half ago to essentially screen for visas. So, Matt Walsh probably wouldn't be able to be a U.S. citizen. Ron Paul wouldn't be able to be a U.S. citizen. Candace Owens wouldn't be able to be a U.S. citizen. Pat Buchanan wouldn't be able to be a U.S. citizen. Thomas Massey wouldn't be able to become a U.S. citizen, because they're breaking the IHRA international hate speech definition. So when Pam Bondi says hate speech, hate speech, hate speech, she's not going to say that's what she means. She's going to be like, oh, I wasn't talking about that. It's not about what you're talking about. It's about what you're doing. You could talk about whatever you want, but if you're policing hate speech for Israel and you're rigging the democratic or the visa process to make sure that nobody has opinions like Tucker Carlson in order to get a visa in America, and you're telling people that are here on a visa that they have the First Amendment for everything except for Israel, we know what you're doing. So that's why I think if you actually believe that it's Trump versus the bad guys, the right versus the left, and you actually truly believe that the Republican Party cares about free speech and they're only getting revenge on the Democrats in ways that are ethical, or at least in bare minimum that are going to, make sure that the media is better now, then I would understand celebrating it as a win. If you realize who's truly controlling the Republican Party, if you realize who's buying up TikTok with Trump's help, if you realize that it's the same family that just acquired CBS and that did a big deal with the UFC, and you know what they're doing, and you've read the reports about them trying to give Barry Weiss a lot of money, because everybody knows who Barry Weiss is and what she's doing as far as media. She's not some sort of moderate liberal turned conservative. She's like, I mean, you could decide for yourself, but she's basically just like mini Ben Shapiro pretending to be like a moderate, where everything just funnels back to her support for Israel. And it's just like Zionist opposition media where everybody's like, oh, wow, this is so moderate now. It's a funnel to get you to have her foreign policy views. So in my opinion, that's the new landscape. That's something that's worth looking at. That's something but most people, they're 5 years behind on this stuff. They're going to be like, oh, look, the media is really right wing now. It's like, are they though? Like, who's Republican mainstream media? Fox News, who I apologize to people who actually trust them and believe them, but you're basically just being programmed with false opposition, and it's just comfortable. New York Post, which is Murdoch Media, owned by Rupert Murdoch as well, which is, sometimes telling the truth, but 95% of the time pushing the Mark Levin foreign policy, just like every Republican media. Like, it's all basically like a controlled limited hangout setup where it's like, hardy har har, here's Greg Gutfeld. Hardy har har, here's Sean Hannity. All right, as long as you believe this, this, and this, we'll give you a little bit of truth, but we got to keep you in this direction. And anytime anybody shatters that programming, like Tucker Carlson wasn't even doing that much on Fox News, but he was shattering the program. So in my opinion, it's the same thing as Candace Owens on, Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire. It's like, is she successful? Yes. Is she making money? I don't know the finances, but probably, Candace. But is she destroying the rest of the narrative? Yes. So now it's a problem. It's not just about, oh, well, she's doing good business. It's not about business to some people, it's about a narrative and making people believe certain things about certain foreign countries. So even though Candace might or might have not been good for business, she's got to go, because if you have one news host ruining the programming of all the other news hosts, then they got to go. That's what happened to Tucker and Candace. Like, Tucker was the number one show on television, but if Tucker Carlson is bigger than everyone else and he's the only one telling the truth about the wars, he's got to go, So this is, and I'm not trying to be rude, but so many people still act like they don't trust Fox News, but they watch Fox News. It's like, why would you watch a television station that kicked off the number one show, who was actually telling the truth, to make sure that that wasn't allowed on the platform? It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what I think. I'll read a few comments now. I'm not going to spend that much time talking about it, but is it a win? I guess I'm not sad about it. I don't care about Jimmy Kimmel, but to me, it just seems like this limited hangout. Well, the right's going to celebrate, the left's it's the same as the Epstein. The left's going to pretend like they care about the Epstein files. The right's going to pretend like the left doesn't care because it's true. And then that'll create the story. The story is it's just a Democrat hoax. That's what Donald Trump says, because Donald Trump, he's probably not, he probably can't allow that to come out. He's probably like under so much duress that it's not even possible to want that to come out. So now that becomes the narrative. If you like Trump, you're like, it's a Democrat hoax. Yes, the Democrats don't care about the Epstein stuff, but no, it's not a Democrat hoax. It's just, that's the WWE show to make you fight the other side when it's the same people controlling both. It's the same thing with Jimmy Kimmel. Television media is totally irrelevant. They don't care if people fight over this for 5 years, because television licenses don't matter now as much as streaming. It's about CBS Paramount. The app is going, and the subscriptions are going to eventually, if not already, make more money than the television stations. Who bought CBS? Larry Ellison's son. Who is acquiring TikTok? Larry Ellison. Who was upset? Who made sure that TikTok hired a former IDF member to start quashing criticism of Israel? I don't know who called that decision, but somebody at TikTok, because that's who's moderating content now. So it's like, these are if you think it's left versus right, then I don't know what to tell you, but that's not how I see it. So appreciate y'all. I'll read a few comments, and yeah, that's my, I guess, nuanced take about it. If you're upset at the hypocrisy of the right and the fact that they say they're pro free speech, but they won't let Jimmy Kimmel speak, makes sense to me. If you think it's a huge win, screw Jimmy Kimmel, screw the left, we don't play by their rules, makes sense to me. I just see it a little bit differently. I don't think it's a win for other reasons. I mean, yeah, the hypocrisy is obvious, but it's just like a not really that important, like turning Jimmy Kimmel into like a living, activist now over something that is a dying platform. Let's see. I'll read a few comments, and I'm going to try to keep this one under an hour, because I have other stuff I want to work on today. Not to be like a hipster about it. Oh, I got other stuff to work on. I'm so cool. We got 800 people here. I appreciate y'all. I'm just saying I want to do something meaningful and work on something. Someone said it's not left versus right. Meanwhile, leftists are celebrating the killing of Kirk. A lot of things can be true at once. I do think that the left is spiritually wicked, and I do think that they have bad views. I'm not sitting here, like, you have to understand, when I say it's not the left versus the right, I'm not acting like, oh, everybody's a little wrong, but at the same time, like the left, we're going to get unity and stuff. I don't think there's going to be left versus right unity. I'm not saying the left is awesome. I'm just saying the left is beyond misled on policy. They're not all, but a lot of them are literally spiritually rotten. And this is one thing I will say, like, and not that this is a good thing, but it's just the reality of life. The more obvious stuff gets, it starts becoming like oil and water, if that's the right terminology, if those two things separate. Like, the crazier things get, you have to be a literal psychopath to not at least see it. You don't have to pick a side and be a Republican, but it's like, like I said, my buddy that's a producer, he hit me up and he said, dude, I've never realized how crazy left-wingers were until Charlie Kirk died. That's what he told me. I was like, really? I've seen it for so long, but he couldn't believe the response. Like, it's not that people just didn't like Charlie Kirk. The things they were saying woke him up, where he, like, if you can't at least figure that, it's deeper than left versus right. And oh, these people have bad opinions. There's a spiritual segregation going on where you don't have to be a Republican. You certainly don't have to like Trump, because I don't. But if you don't understand the wickedness, it's beyond mental. It's like a spiritual, demonic thing going on here. It's beyond politics. So I'm not saying the left and the right are exactly the same. I don't think they are. But just like the left is celebrating his death, that's a spiritual wickedness. And I'm not suggesting, oh, it's the left and the right and we're going to come together. I'm not saying that. I lean more right. I don't think the left is right about almost anything except for a few things. And usually when they're right, it's for the wrong reasons. And unless they change their hearts and souls, none of their activism matters. On that note, if the right looks at that, I always used to say, imagine playing basketball and saying you're like almost pro level. You're like, I could be a pro basketball player, but you only play, a baby on a Fisher Price set, and you're like dunking on a baby, and you're like, see, that makes me good at basketball. That's how I see the left versus the right. The right is the baby that can't shoot a basketball. And I'm not trying to be rude, but they're so wicked and they're so wrong about everything that they would make any Democrat from 20 years ago look like a genius. Like, that's how fake and lost and broken that the left is. So if the right's entire identity is, well, look at the left, that doesn't make you an impressive person. That doesn't make you right. That doesn't mean you're not getting tricked. It's the same thing as during COVID. It's like, well, Donald Trump printed trillions of dollars and rushed a vaccine and became a socialist, borderline communist, but at least he didn't mandate it. And that creates the Overton window or the arena for now Republicans are accepting crazy stuff in order to justify like just total failure from Donald Trump. Like, at least he didn't mandate it. Well, that's because you're comparing to the left, who's insane. So that's kind of my analogy for the left versus the right. I'm not saying that the left and the right are going to come together because the elites are just tricking us. Yeah, the elites are tricking everybody, but the left is spiritually rotten, and it's on a level that I don't want to even be near. But that doesn't mean that the right is impressive or not getting tricked. That's the issue. It's like, and this is why I call a lot of media like limited hangout fake opposition media, because their entire existence is just to make you laugh like a baby. They throw you like a binky, or they throw you like a like a ball, and you're and it's like throwing a ball to a dog, or like a toy to like a 2-year-old. Like, that's most Republican media. So you're like all happy about nothing while your leaders are scamming you. So yeah, I don't think we're all gonna come in the middle and hold hands or anything, but so many Republicans have been conditioned to be like, well, I'm better than the left. Okay, well, I'm better. I could run faster than somebody with no legs. So, does that make me Usain Bolt? It's the same thing. It's like, I'm better than the left. I would hope so. I used to say a tube of toothpaste would make a better president than Kamala Harris. So well, Donald Trump didn't mandate the vaccine. Yeah, he only printed trillions of dollars. Like, Karl Marx would have a wet dream over what Donald Trump does, but that doesn't concern MAGA, because they just look at Joe Biden and they're like, well, Joe Biden opened the border, printed trillions of dollars, and mandated the vaccine. Yeah, that's horrible. That's why I'm a Republican. But that doesn't mean that Trump is good. Trump says he's like the best president of all time. He thinks he's better than George Washington. Trump is one of the worst presidents of all time. He's just better than Joe Biden. It's just like, yeah, compared to Joe Biden, he's like Michael Jordan. But compared to any actual person that doesn't just print money like Karl Marx on steroids, he's actually not a good president. And, even all this tariff stuff, like, I'm pro-America, but the tariff thing, I don't even, now that it's all like settling in, I was always like on the fence about it, just trying to wait and be patient. But it's like, of course it's going to hurt trade. Let's just say that there are no tariffs, and tariffs are a tax on the consumer. So it's a United States tax. We're being taxed. The US government's probably getting it, and we're still going into debt. So it's not like they're using our tariff. This is why Elon Musk went out of Trump's administration, was like, he's in the Epstein files, deuces. I'm not saying Elon's the most trustworthy person, but Elon went there probably thinking that he was going to balance the debt. Once he realized that Republicans are psychopaths and they're not balancing the debt, it's like, at least if you're going to tax consumers and tax buyers, at least, or traders, at least balance the budget with the money you're getting. They're not doing crap. And it's like, let's just say in a free market, right? Some people can buy really cheap stuff from other countries. other people can make better stuff in America, and you could sell really cheap stuff to people who are broke and don't care, and then you could sell higher quality stuff to everybody. Now with all of these tariffs, it's like I'm sure there's a lot of businesses hurting, at a time where our economy is already hurting. It's not like all the money Trump's raising that like our deficit's going down, it's going up. So what is he? It's not even doing anything besides taxing consumers. It's taxing consumers, but in some ways making people want to build stuff in America, not out of the kindness of their hearts or the free market, but the weight of the US government. And then Trump has no American ethics with his tariffs. He's using his tariffs in the same way they used to use sanctions, and basically trying to punish foreign countries for not listening to the US. Meanwhile, all these countries are losing respect for us and plotting against us, like the Indian president. He doesn't care. And this is my prediction too, just based off listening to everybody. The Indian president meets with Putin, Trump gets mad, Indian president doesn't care. Indian president meets with Kim Jong-un and Xi, Trump gets mad, Indian president doesn't care. Indian president meets with Netanyahu. Like the Indian president and other countries, they don't respect America anymore. And my prediction is this, that listening to Netanyahu talk, he says, we need to start making our weapons in Israel, right? Because he realizes that if AIPAC and other lobbies can't completely dominate U.S. politics forever, then eventually United States citizens, especially when we're tens of trillions of dollars into debt or whatever, they're not going to want to keep giving money to Israel or Ukraine or anybody. I mean, that's a huge thing in America now. A lot of the youth, they're tired of foreign aid. So Netanyahu's talking about making his own weapons. As soon as they don't need the United States of America, they're not going to care about the United States of America, nor do I think they really do now. We have this alliance now where everybody says they share intelligence with us. So they get to tell our intelligence communities what they think. And yeah, sure. And they have a bunch of surveillance and stuff. Okay, I understand it's an alliance to some extent, but in 10, 15 years, once they realize, or if America ever gets to the point where America's like, hey, I want a fair deal. Like this hasn't been fair for the last 50 years. We're going into debt. You have free healthcare. We're getting absolutely screwed. We're fighting these wars. Our country's just completely flooded with refugees. Not to say it's necessarily all your fault, but let's get a fair shake. Let's do a fair deal. You think they're going to be like, yeah, let's do it. No, they're going to completely at some point probably just pull away from America if they ever need to. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but I don't know. I get that it's a complicated situation. I just feel like we're pissing off literally all of our allies. We're pissing off Canada. Not that I cared that much, but a lot of Europe, we're using tariffs to make them agree with Israel. We're mad at India because they're doing oil with Russia. Why can nobody do deals with Russia? Why are we trying to isolate Russia? What do we want to do with Russia? It's because of the Ukraine thing, but it's just like we're just a big joke. Trump is like a big joke to me. But I wish him well. I hope he can pull it together. My analysis is that he has no power. Either he's completely like controlled or he just never wanted to in the first place. But either way, I don't think he is in the position to actually do anything. And the one thing I'll say before I get back to the comments to kind of prove my thoughts on that, everybody remembers when he had Zelensky in the White House and he told Zelensky, he said, you don't have the cards. I was one of the only people, not to brag, but I guess I am bragging, but in general, when Trump said that, I loved it, right? I said, that's funny. He told Zelensky he doesn't have the cards. JD Vance is fighting with him. But I told people a day or two after that happened, while we could celebrate a funny moment where Trump is big upping Zelensky, I said to people, it's actually Trump who doesn't have the cards because the same people that control Zelensky are the same people that control Trump. And while Trump is allowed to have a moment on television and tell you, you don't have the cards, Zelensky, so Republicans can celebrate a fake win again. Oh, look, we got another Jimmy Kimmel win where Trump says that Zelensky doesn't have the cards. He said that. And I said, days after, I said, and I was one of the only Republican or conservative type influencers, whatever you want to call me, to say this. I said, Trump doesn't have the cards. Him and Zelensky have the same owners. And Trump's owners are Zelensky's owners, and they're not going to allow Trump to do that. What happened? Is the war in Ukraine done? No. Are they even pretending like it's going to be finished? No. Trump is basically Mark Levin on foreign policy. Trump is like, Putin's doing really bad stuff now. Okay, you could think that. I don't care about Putin or Russia. I'm just saying that's not what Trump campaigned on. He didn't campaign on blaming Putin, and Zelensky doesn't have the cards. He's all mad at Zelensky. He's not mad at Zelensky. Him and Zelensky, he probably actually is, but Trump is not this free figure to do what he wants. He's completely controlled by the same people. And that's the sad reality of it. I mean, another thing to prove this, and this is like, if you asked, I don't know the exact number, but this just proves why I was saying what I was saying about the Republican Party. Most Republican media compares them to the left. So you say, well, I'm so much smarter than the left. True. I'm so much better than the left. Yeah, they're spiritually rotten to the core. But because you've been comparing yourself to the left so much, or people have, they don't realize so many things. Like when I talk to most people that like Trump and I tell them that Trump is taking donor money, they actually don't even believe it. Like I've talked to many people that like Trump and they're like, Trump doesn't need their money. He's so rich, he doesn't need their money. Like they still believe 2015 Trump, who said, I don't need anybody's money. I'm so rich, I don't need the money. That's what he said when he ran the first time. He's taken like billions of donor money. He's taken over $500 million from the Adelson family. He's taken hundreds of millions of dollars from mega donors. Not only did that happen shortly after Trump won the election, this last election, he wasn't even pretending to use his own money. Trump used so much donor money. He's totally controlled by the donors. And MAGA is so brainwashed, they actually think that Trump doesn't take donor money. Like they don't even want to believe that. They're living in this fantasy world where Trump is so rich, he doesn't need anyone's money. The reality is, if you search Trump George Soros loan, you could find out in his heyday, Trump took multi-$100 million loan from George Soros. First of all, Trump has always needed their money. All his money's wrapped up in real estate for the most part. And yes, Trump is a rich person, but if you need a multi-$100 million loan from George Soros to buy properties, you're not as powerful as him because you're borrowing his money. So Trump has always been a money borrower to some extent because that's just how the business works. Often you don't use your own money. You get investors, et cetera, loans you pay back. That's smart business. I'm not knocking it, but Trump was never who he pretended to be. But then he publicly showed people that he wasn't who he was. Yet MAGA just closes their eyes and ears and says, oh, he's so rich, he doesn't need anyone's money. Guys, he took over $500 million from the Adelson family. He has videos saying that when they used to come to the White House more than anybody, they'd always ask for things for Israel. Yet when I say that they pay Trump to do things for Israel, that's anti-Semitism. But Trump literally says it himself. So when Trump says it, it's ha-ha funny. When I say it, it's anti-Semitism, even though it's factually true. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just hopefully trying to wake some people up to the reality of like, there's so much there that MAGA doesn't see because they're always fighting the left. You understand? We're beating Jimmy Kimmel. Sure you are. Sure. That's what this is all about. It's all about pro-America stuff, beating Jimmy Kimmel. Okay. I wish. I hope so. But someone said that's a lie. Mark on Facebook, my brother. What's a lie? You think it's a lie that Trump took $500 million from the Adelson family and then said that they always come to the White House asking for things for Israel? I'll find the clip for you if you want, but it's there. I've played it before. I just think you don't want to believe that, so you think it's a lie. It's just like, no, Trump, my Trumpy Wumpy. I always say Trump supporters who are like a lot of elderly Trump supporters. I don't want to be rude. We got to respect our elders, but the ones that obsess over Trump, it's like a baby watching the Teletubbies. And when you walk in front of the TV, the baby starts throwing the applesauce at you. Get out of the way. That's like a boomer with Trumpy Wumpy. Trumpy Wumpy's on the TV. Get out of the way. It's my Trumpy Wumpy. Yeah. No, he's never taken donor money. Yeah, he has. And it's factual. And he's taken over, him and the GOP have taken over $500 million. And he sat in public and said they're in the White House more than anybody else that doesn't work in the White House. And they're always asking for things for Israel. And Trump said, and I'd say, can you give me a week? Like basically being like, I'm doing everything I can for you. And you guys still want more. Like he said that. Everything I said is like easily maybe not easily findable, but my analogy is a baby show. It's a lie. We know he will take donations. Okay. You don't think that millions of people who like Trump think he's so rich he's not taking anyone's money and that he's this free bird to do whatever he wants? I guarantee you there's millions of people. Maybe not you, which is awesome, but there's millions. Trust me. Most people don't know this stuff because it's not reported. And what I'm telling you is there's a reason it's not reported. When Tucker Carlson started telling the truth, they kicked him out of Fox News. When Candace Owens started going in on the Israel topic, they got rid of her at Daily Wire. Charlie Kirk was starting to platform Tucker Carlson. Charlie Kirk was starting to talk about these things. And I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying the reality is he was under duress from his donors. That's a fact. Charlie said that I don't need to believe what Tucker said. Charlie said it on Megyn Kelly's show. Charlie said that his own pro-Israel stakeholders were basically pressuring him for having an awakening on certain topics. So what I'm trying to tell you is I know the reason most people don't know this stuff. I know the reason because there's a huge concerted effort to not allow anybody to know it. Unfortunately, the internet has, the last 2 years, because of war, because of chaos, etc., most people know this stuff now. Like it doesn't matter what Charlie says or doesn't say or didn't say, and it doesn't matter what Tucker does or doesn't do or Candace says or not says. Like regardless of who is saying what, it no longer matters because everybody knows now. If you go to anyone's comment section, everyone's talking about it all the time. It's the number one most talked about thing in every comment section everywhere. Doesn't matter whose post it's on. If it's on Ben Shapiro's Instagram, he's getting ratioed. All the top comments are saying, I don't trust Ben. I think he does this and that. I'm not saying it's all true. The reality of the situation is they tried really hard to not let that dam break so people couldn't figure this stuff out for 6-7 years. And now that it is out, I'm sure there are plenty of discussions about how to try to put the cat back in the bag. I just don't think it's really possible because, there's like hundreds of millions of people that are talking about it constantly. Like there's no bill that they could pass. There's no media thing that they could pass. Like it's just not going to work. I guess they could try like mass censorship, but I don't think that really works that well. I think it works somewhat, but let's see. Someone said, I tried to wake up my dad. Do not believe Fox. He got mad that I called Netanyahu a war criminal, so I stopped trying. Someone said, the reality is just like everyone likes what they like, like you like the music you grew up on. Everybody likes the shows that they used to watch. Not all, but a lot of boomers just are comfortable with television media. It's comfortable because it's just easy. It's like, and I understand psychologically, it's like the internet is kind of overwhelming. People use the internet, but it's like, let me just relax and watch the television. I don't got to see all these tweets. Dude, Twitter is like insane. I don't care. Like, yes, there's a lot of real information on it, but like mentally, it probably is less healthy because you're just intaking all this information. Like it's too much for a brain, even if some of it's true and some of it's not. It's everything at once. Fox News is a little bit easier. It's just like, let me just sit back and laugh at Greg Gutfeld. Let me just sit back and watch what this guy says. It's like an easier, I get why boomers like it. It's just more comfortable. It's simpler. It reminds them of a time when Ronald Reagan was in office or something. I get it, but I don't know. Also, it would be nice if maybe they realize that everything that's being said on there is pointing them in a certain direction. But, it is what it is. What sucks is like every generation has a pro and a con. And although boomers are just like so far gone on certain topics and they're never going to wake up, boomers also are like, they do things, like the younger generation, they don't do that much. Like, are they building? Are they, that's why, and I'm not justifying it, but I do believe, and once again, this is not justifying mass immigration because I think it's gone too far, but a lot of people don't want mass immigration, but also the younger generation doesn't do anything. Like the boomers, as much as you might despise their political views and their selfishness, they actually come from a generation where they do things. So this younger generation, what are they doing? Does anyone want to work anywhere? Does anybody have a real job? Like I could think of 7 or 8 jobs I did. I feel like somewhat of a hypocrite on this topic because I just run an internet show. I don't think, even though I think I'm providing value, I'm not providing like physical, actual value of like building something. But in my teens and 20s, I absolutely did. I worked 15 jobs. I did a lot of actual work. Does anyone under 25 do real jobs anymore? So if nobody's going to work, then they bring in immigrants, either legally or illegally. And I know that people don't like that and don't want that. But the reality is, not that it's right, but like, no, as bad as the boomers can be on some topics, they actually do things like physical things. The younger generation, they just sit online and like rot on Reddit and, just don't want to work a job. They're depressed. They have no social life. They got their entire lives, they were on their cell phone. And then they had COVID where they were like abused psychologically for 2 years. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but it's like people, I think the younger generation, they're going into like niches more. Like there's always going to be really awesome 20-year-olds that are doing a lot. And then there's going to be the ones that are just rotting on their phone. So it's like, I think it's so important for the younger generation to get into like health and fitness and stuff. Any like 20-year-old that's into health and fitness, to me, that's better than politics. It's like you're working out, you have a social life. I'm an athlete, I'm not a professional athlete, but I've always been a great athlete my whole life. And sports were great for me. It taught me competition, it taught me teamwork, but also it just kept me physically fit. And to this day, I love sports. I love, fitness. I love competition. If you're not into fitness and you're just sitting and rotting online, it's extra dark now because of just the way the world is. And that's a lot of people. So I pray that the younger generation, like finds hobbies, like physical hobbies that are healthy for them. And I think fitness, sports, anything like that is good. Not that you have to do fitness or sports, but something that gets you into the real world, talking to people. Yeah, because I feel like they're suffering that for sure. Stacy said, thank you for the $20 super chat, Stacy. She said, you woke me up in 2019 regarding anti-Semite laws, free speech. And thank you so much, Stacy. This is the thing. They don't pass laws for no reason. And I didn't fully understand the anti-Semitism laws then, but I just knew they were inherently not First Amendment compliant. And now I get why they're doing it. It's the same as they're passing all these pharmaceutical executive orders. I don't understand. Why would they need all that? Well, now I'm under a lockdown and they're rushing a vaccine. Oh, they passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, and then they just start jamming vaccines into the schedule because now they can't be sued. Everything happens for a reason, legislative-wise, and I think most people didn't want to talk about that because the risk-reward ratio wasn't popular then. Talking about that in 2019 basically meant a permanent blacklist from Republican media, and your career is over as far as like in the mainstream and where the money is. So the risk reward wasn't there. Once again, not to brag, but I know for a fact dozens of influencers who knew this in 2019. They knew I was right. They knew I wasn't wrong, but the risk reward wasn't there. Why am I going to talk about these speech laws when doesn't seem that important? Nothing's really changing that much. And also, if I talk about it, I'm going to lose, my $5,000 to $10,000 a month job at this network. Like, what's the point? And now a war broke out. Tens of thousands of civilians have died. We're fighting multiple wars. Our government is just seemingly just like in the hands of Israel. Now everyone wants to talk about it, but the laws were always there for a reason. Like they were always going to be used. So, and this is like, I think Charlie was trying to say this before he was assassinated, but I think, and Charlie came from a heavy pro-Israel vantage point, but I think Charlie understood the turning of the tides, and what Charlie was trying to plead to his donors and the pro-Israel side that hates Tucker Carlson is you have to have a little bit of self-awareness about why people feel the way they do. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to abandon your love for a foreign nation, but what you do have to do is understand it. And this is all I've been trying to say since 2019. Where it's like, if let's just say I'll take any bias I have, right? Let's just say I don't have any political bias, not left, not right. I don't watch any media. I'm just an American citizen with no views on Israel or Palestine or anything that's looking at politics, right? Just on social media. And I'm not talking about social media people talking about it. I'm talking about the politicians. I would come to the conclusion, with no political understanding at all, no bias towards or against Israel, I would come to the conclusion that Israel controls America. Because if you look at politics, it's nuts. Like there's 250 politicians in Israel. Mike Johnson's flying to Israel. Marco Rubio's kissing the wall. Mike Huckabee's kissing the wall. Anybody with no clue on what's going on would come to the conclusion that Israel's controlling America. Imagine if I lived in Ireland and every Irish politician was always flying to Saudi Arabia, kissing an orb, dressing up like a Saudi Arabian, performing their religion. I would be like, yeah, Ireland's controlled by Saudi Arabia. Like, that's what the average person would think just based off of politics. There's a recess in America where they can't vote for Trump's appointments. And the first thing that most of the major politicians do is fly to Israel. It's like, so even if you're the most pro-Israel person in the world, everyone is starting to notice that our entire political landscape revolves around Israel in a way that is like overtly over the top. Everyone notices. Everyone. Like, even if you're the most pro-Israel person ever, you don't see that. Like, when I log into social media, I wouldn't even know particularly that our politicians work at all for us. I would think that they were Israeli politicians if I had no context just looking at their Twitter feed. That's just the reality of the situation. And it would be true to any country. It just so happens to be Israel. So if people want to not talk about that and just call everybody anti-Semites, there's no way it'll work. Thank you, Carrie C, for the super chat. Like, and once again, I am not Charlie Kirk. We are not exactly the same. I'm not going to try to hijack his legacy for mine or anything. In fact, I want to do the opposite and just let Charlie talk in his own words. But the truth is, Charlie was saying that towards the end of his life. You know, he was pro-Israel. He was in love with Israel. He did like the people there and the nation, and he's a Christian. But he was pleading to the pro-Israel sycophants, like, guys, this strategy that we're running is not working. Like, Charlie was on the ground. Charlie was getting ratioed on all his Instagram posts, like, you know, about Israel. Like, he was like, we have to have better messaging. And they hated him for it, you know, because he was right. It's just like, it's not working because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, you know, it's if I logged into social media and like only a few politicians flew to Israel and stuff, then I'd be like, yeah, it's whatever. Everyone flies everywhere. But it's like, I said Doge should just move Washington, D.C. to Israel, and we could probably save a couple $1 million on flights. If they're paying for their flights, they're probably free anyway. But in general, it's like, why is Washington, D.C. in America? It might as well just be in Tel Aviv at this point. That's just the reality of how politics looks. Like, they're all just flying there doing this. And this is one thing that a lot of people are asking too, where I don't disrespect any religion. Some people do. Some people disrespect other religions like overtly because they like theirs. I don't do that. I'm not called to do that. But even though I respect Islam, and even though I respect, you know, Judaism in some ways, I don't fully understand Judaism because it seems like everyone has different opinions. But in general, it's like, even though I respect everyone's right to worship their religion, even though it's not mine, I'm not going to put on a hat and like perform their religion. To me, that's subservience. Like, maybe I'll put on a certain outfit if I'm in a different country, but to put on a religious hat and kiss a wall, I don't know. To me, it just seems like you're bowing down to that religion. Are Israeli politicians going to churches and putting on crosses and bowing down in front of Jesus Christ? I haven't seen it unless they're Christian. Why would, and I'm not knocking them. Why would they do that? That would be crazy for them to do. So they don't do it. It's like, Israeli politicians have more self-respect than American politicians. Why are you bowing down to another religion that's not yours? It doesn't make sense. Thank you for the super chat, Holly. Says the urgency to kiss the wall. You know, it's just one of these things where everyone sees that. It's not normal. If every Israeli politician would fly to America or fly to the Vatican, go to the church and just wear crosses and start praying in front of rosary, Israelis would rightfully be like, are you working for the church? You know, like, it's one thing to respect them. It's another thing to completely just bow down to their religion, like, you know, constantly. No one else would do that. No Muslim would do that. No, like, it's just so obvious to the average person looking at it. Someone said, seems weird to do that if you were a true Christian. I mean, I would never do that. You know, it would be no disrespect, but it's like, I'm not wearing the hat. I'm not kissing the wall for a photo op. Like I'll respect your religion, I'll respect your holy sites, etc. But I'm not gonna like for the cameras pretend like I'm a different religion right now. It is like a humiliation ritual, but there's something to it. Someone said, have you ever seen them come over here in a church? That's what I'm saying. And they shouldn't. But that's why my criticism, I guess if you can call it, is not with a foreign nation. It's with my politicians. And I'm not just saying this to be safe or whatever. It's the reality of the situation. Other countries they're not swearing on the Constitution to protect America. They're serving their nation. When an Israeli politician gets in office, their job is to serve Israel. And if anyone has studied history, Israel is ruthless in their self-determination. Israel is ruthless in the ways that they will gain leverage in order to help their nation. And whether you hate it or love it, they're doing literally almost everything they can to try to, in their view, probably help their nation. Why are our politicians not doing that? Not to say that they should go to some sort of ruthless lengths, but I'm just saying like I don't expect them to do anything for me. I expect our politicians to do what they're supposed to do, but they don't. And with that being said, this is just my thoughts about it. And once again, I don't know, like I'm not a world leader. I don't know the ins and outs of what does or doesn't work, but this is just me thinking, and this is just my thoughts on just morality in general is sometimes like overdoing it doesn't work. So even if a government or a country, including our own, tries to overdo everything, think this way, do this, we want everyone to like us, so we're going to do all these things. Sometimes force seems to work when in war and stuff. I'm not completely like a pacifist or anything, but at the same time, I do believe that if you're trying so hard to inorganically do everything at any cost, it ends up not working. Where you look at the PR right now for our governments at a low. I don't think anybody trusts the government or the media. And then for Israel, it's the same thing. Like Megyn Kelly said, nobody under 30 likes Israel. Not nobody, but it's definitely a small portion that likes Israel. It's only the boomers for the most part. But the question is why? And if you're really an honest person on any side, you'll weigh out everything. You'll be like, okay, some people are maybe getting tricked. Some people are evil. Some people are wrong. But then you have to somewhere in that equation bring in self-accountability and self-awareness. And I can really best speak for my story. And I think Charlie in his last weeks or months was speaking his story. And we're different people. But it's like for me, I know for a fact, I never had a single negative thought about Israel. I wasn't raised to like Palestine. I didn't even think about Israel, to be honest. I had a Jewish friend who was really nice. His parents were really nice to me. That's really all I thought about. I didn't even really understand race and religion and Judaism. I just knew my Jewish friend growing up, shout out my buddy Greg, his family was awesome. He was nice to me. They never, I would say his mom was like overtly nice to me. And like his dad was really nice to me. Like in no way were they ever disrespectful to me at all. I had nothing but good experiences with Jewish people in my life. And then when I got into politics, I just started talking about the anti-Semitism hate speech laws. That literally thought nothing about Israel or Palestine. I didn't even know what was going on there. I just, from a First Amendment standpoint, was like, this bill's not right. The whole world came crashing down on me in Republican media. You're an anti-Semite. You're far right. You're an anti-Semite. And my career in mainstream politics essentially ended that day that I started talking about that. So then I started diving deeper because I'm intelligent. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why? Like, what is this? And the more I learn, I'm like, oh, this is the third rail of politics. This is what's really going on. And if you want to take it to somebody else, if you don't believe that that's my story when it is, listen to what Charlie was saying in his last month. Charlie was the most pro. If you asked me top 5 pro-Israel people, I probably would have said Charlie Kirk outside of politicians. Top 5 non-Jewish pro-Israel people, Charlie Kirk. He's so pro-Israel. Yet he's being smeared as an anti-Semite and an enemy. And Megyn Kelly is being smeared as a Hamas supporter when they're killing journalists overseas that they say are Hamas, and they're calling Megyn Kelly that, some people. If that's not a sign to the pro-Israel side, like Charlie's not enough for you, what is enough for you then? It's literally like 100% subservient. They basically want you to have no thoughts of your own, just like a leftist. It's the same thought. So, if people don't want to acknowledge that, then they're just going to keep losing the average person for that reason. Yes, there's always going to be misinformation, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, like, that is how everyone is treated. I was treated that way. Charlie was treated that way. Everyone was treated that way. Some people woke up at different times and started saying different stuff, but not everyone is Candace Owens. And I'm not even saying anything bad about her. I'm just saying, like, you might look at some of her videos and she went really deep on World War II and stuff. That's going to piss some people off. Not that it necessarily should, but I'm just saying, for the average, like, that's not, people think like, oh, it's Candace Owens just started going so hard, that's why they got mad at her. I don't know her story. She could tell her story. I don't know when she changed her tune or what was the moment but I do for sure. She probably has a long story of it, but with me, I know my story. It had nothing to do with Israel. It just had to do with American speech laws, and they called me anti-Semitic. Charlie bent over backwards into a pretzel his entire life defending Israel, and they still called him an anti-Semite, and they still called him, not the state necessarily, but their lobby in America, or their pro sycophants in America. And what I've noticed too is when that happens, this is the really frustrating part, right? That I think Charlie would seem to experience and profess. You expect your friends to start, and some like he said some are coming to my defense, but not enough for him to be like happy about it. He said like pretty much every institution was turning, but he said, I spent my whole life defending Israel. When these accusations of anti-Semitism start coming in on Charlie, he's expecting all his friends in like pro-Israel media and pro-Israel donors and stuff to come to his defense and be like, you know what, Charlie's one of the good guys. But that's not the reality that happens. Nobody comes in your defense. And then they just, if you're like noticing that everybody is like turning against you and you point it out, then they just call you an anti-Semite. They're like, that's a conspiracy theory that this is happening. I'll post an article from Times of Israel, and not all, because I'm just being clear. Some people that are Jewish will flock to the comments and start freaking out. And it's like, and it's like, what? Why are you like, okay, so am I allowed to say that you're bending over backwards into a pretzel to defend the Times of Israel? Which is fine. You can do it. But I don't know anyone who does that for Fox News. I crap on Fox News all the time in front of people that watch Fox News every day. And I can't even think of even a boomer that watches Fox News who gets mad. Most boomers who watch Fox News are like, yeah, Fox sucks sometimes. Like, I can't even recall a single boomer freaking out when I make fun of Fox News. Not even once, even though millions of them watch it. Yet you're acting like a psychopath defending your own people in order to say that it's not happening and it's a global conspiracy theory that everybody's working together when everyone sees it. Like, it's not that everyone's doing it, but it's like you don't want people to say what you're doing, and then you get mad that they notice. So it's like when Charlie's being called all these names, he's like, okay, well, I've spent my whole life defending Israel. I'm guessing all my powerful friends are going to rush to my defense, right? And then he looks around and nobody's rushing to his defense, because that's what they do. When everybody starts bashing you, they all play stupid and they say, I don't see it. They all act like the Anti-Defamation League's a left-wing organization. They're not a left-wing organization. They're a Jewish organization. And when they start slandering you, sometimes people rush to your defense, but most of the time they look the other way. And Ben Shapiro will go on a show and say that they're a progressive organization, yet they work with governments. They work, Elise Stefanik speaks at their conference, who's in the Trump administration. If they're such a radical left-wing organization, which they're not, why is Elise Stefanik speaking at their organization? Because they work together, and it's like left and right. And then when the left hits you, they act like they don't see it. And then the right does it. And then it's like they're working in unison. But then if you say they're working in unison, they just say that you're being hateful for noticing what they're doing. So it's like, that's the reality of this media, is probably dozens of people that Charlie Kirk helped. When push comes to shove, they all turn on him, but then he's not allowed to say they're all turning on him, because that's hate speech. Tucker talks about this with Seth Dillon, and their personal issues are probably deeper because they know each other. But Seth Dillon was basically, Babylon Bee was popular, but one of their biggest like jumps, I think, in attention was when they were getting canceled by left wing or social media. And Tucker Carlson apparently had Seth Dillon on the show, and he says he likes Seth Dillon still to this day. But Seth Dillon has hated on Tucker Carlson so heavily. And Tucker, I don't think he's ever really said much about him, at least beforehand. Seth Dillon is like a hyper defender of Israel. Seth Dillon is somebody that doesn't think Tucker Carlson should speak on stage because Tucker talks about Israel. Seth Dillon like wraps himself into a pretzel on every level to basically prioritize Israel. Okay, sure, you're allowed to do that, but now, even though Tucker helped him at one point in his life and Tucker thinks he's friends with him, Seth Dillon turns on Tucker as soon as Tucker starts talking about that. Everybody knows who is who in the media and who does that sort of stuff. And that's the reality of the media. You can help these people all you want. You could be friends with them. But the second you start mentioning Israel, they all turn on you and they all start acting like you're crazy and you're kooky. How come they never talk to Tucker? That's my only question. It's like, Tucker loves debating. At any point, I'm sure Seth Dillon could text Tucker and say, hey, I would love to come on your show and debate what you're saying because I think it's wrong. How come he never does that? How come he just says, Charlie, he tweeted out at Charlie and said, basically like it's a shame that you're allowing Tucker to speak on your stage. And those you could go look at those. Thank you, Elmera. I appreciate it. Same with Candace, dude. You could say, and I'm not saying you necessarily have to debate everybody, but Candace and Tucker are two people that at any moment, any of these people could go on their show and debate. They love debating. They love bringing on guests, both of them. Why are none of these really great debate? They don't want to talk to Tucker. They'll get cooked. They know they'll get cooked. So it's like, I view these people the same way I view leftists, as they pretend that they're friends with Tucker. They smear Tucker. They smear Charlie Kirk for talking to Tucker, but they won't actually communicate with them. How is that not exactly like a left? They don't want to debate. They just want to take you off the stage. It's the same thing the left does. Someone said let me see. So someone said, so Charlie Kirk's dad was a New York architect and assisted in the Trump Towers. How is that political? I mean, I guess it would be political because now Trump's the president or something, but I don't, as far as who Charlie Kirk's dad was, et cetera, maybe you're talking to somebody else, but I don't really care. I try to meet people where they are and, give them the credit or not, like, if that's affecting who he was or whatever, that's one thing. But as far as who his dad was and with Trump, maybe you're talking to someone else. And I've said this too, who Charlie was so important. Like, regardless of how much you liked or disliked him, he was one of the biggest figures in Republican politics, top 5. He controlled the youth. He had the biggest activist program. Like, there's a lot of things that Charlie was number one. And it wasn't just podcasting or talking. He was like the number one organizer. He ran the biggest events. He controlled a lot of the mainstream Republican right. So when Charlie would do certain things, it would really, like, it wasn't just like, oh, somebody said something on a podcast. It was like, wow, we can't lose Charlie. You have, and I'm going to probably try to make a video about this. I don't know, because it's going to take me forever, but I think I should probably take the time to do it. But there's so many people, and I'll just say this. There's so many people on Twitter that are saying there's no evidence that Charlie was shifting later in his life, right? Because there's now a sick fight over Charlie's legacy, right? Pro-Israel people are trying to say Charlie was pro-Israel. Critics of Israel were saying Charlie was starting to criticize Israel. So there's this massive, and it rubs a lot of people the wrong way because, people want to just grieve his loss and not have people fighting over his legacy. So there's this massive argument going on X and social media right now. Who was Charlie Kirk? Was he pro-Israel? Was he starting to be critical of Israel? And this is all I'll say, because I'm going to let the word speak for himself. And I implore you to go listen to Charlie over the last few months, like his Megyn Kelly interview. But in general, the same pro-Israel sycophants that are saying there's no evidence that Charlie was changing his tune, you could find tweets of them 2 months ago pissed off because Charlie was changing his tune. So, for example, I don't know what Mark Levin's saying now because I don't follow him, but a couple of months ago, he has a tweet still up where he said, essentially, Charlie, we can't afford to lose you. We don't want to lose you. Don't talk to this kook or whatever. Like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but his message was, we're losing Charlie. We can't afford to lose Charlie. He's starting to side with Tucker. And I think, Mark Levin and Tucker are beefing. So I don't think Mark Levin wanted Charlie to be so close to Tucker, but Charlie was. And Charlie was platforming Tucker, and Charlie wasn't listening to Mark Levin and others. So this is all I'll say. I'm not fighting over who Charlie was or wasn't, but nearly 100% of the time, the same pro-Israel sycophants and the same Zionists who are saying there's no evidence that Charlie was changing his tune, the evidence is on their Twitter feed because they were complaining about Charlie Kirk changing his tune months ago. You know, you could find almost all of them like clockwork. They were all complaining. Charlie's, you know, one of them said Charlie's becoming the woke right. There's some sort of American Jewish Committee, I think it's called. They tweeted about Charlie Kirk talking about Epstein and Mossad and saying it was anti-Semitic. And Tucker stated that on his show. And then Joel Pollack, who's the editor at large at Breitbart, he says he misquoted Tucker, purposely probably, but he's like, you know, Tucker, it's crazy that he's saying that the American Jewish people said this about Charlie. It's on their Twitter. Like exactly what Tucker said, that committee tweeted that Charlie was going too far on that topic. That's a fact. Go look at it. They were not happy about it. And then this is the issue with the pro-Israel side and the Zionist sycophants. They create this alternate reality that anybody with an IQ over 80 can just look at because it's like, oh, Tucker said American Jewish this and that. Like he quoted it wrong. There's a specific committee and Tucker quoted it right. Joel Pollack seemed to quote it wrong. And then he's acting like it's this insane anti-Semitic conspiracy theory when you can literally listen to what Tucker said, go to their Twitter, and find the tweet that Tucker's talking about. It's still there. So that's the issue. And you know, Tucker says something about Charlie, and then Ted Cruz tweets it, and he makes up this quote. He puts it in quotes and makes up a quote that Tucker never said. He's like, oh, you're saying this and that and this and that and this and that in quotes like Tucker said it. You listen to the video, it's nowhere in there. So I'm just being honest. That's why the pro-Israel side's losing the debate. I believe that you can defend Israel and make sense. I know people might not want to hear this because me personally, like I don't agree with what they're doing, but in a crazy world where wars exist and people fight, I think there is a way to present what Israel's doing, no matter how egregious you think it is, and actually make sense and provide a moral argument for it. But that's not what the pro-Israel sycophants are doing. They constantly lie. They constantly make, well, Tucker said this. He literally didn't. Well, how could he be so anti-Semitic to say that this committee said that? Because they literally said it. And everybody can go to their Twitter and see exactly what he said. And it's right there. So like, how many people do they think they're fooling? At this point, it's the same as the left and the right is starting to like have this spiritual separation where the left is just becoming very rotten and just, you know, not everybody on the right is correct, but there is a sense of God and spirit on the right to some people. And on the left, it's just like their souls are rotting. If you're still like, oh, I'm left wing still, it's not it's like oil and vinegar right now, or oil and water. I don't know if they both separate, but you get it. It's the same thing with the pro-Israel crowd. It's like either you're completely delusional or a lot of them have an ethnic bias. Like a lot of them that are just Jewish and they like Israel more than America. You know, you're not supposed to say that, but that's the reality of it. It's like, that's why they're doing it. They have an ethnic bias towards Israel. So they're willing to do whatever they have to do in order to defend Israel. Okay, fair, right? And then other people, it's like the Ted Cruz's of the world. They literally just have to make stuff up because they have no talking points that make any sort of sense to anybody. So there's a way to defend the country and like them, but it just seems like the pro-Israel crowd has gotten so lazy and so sloppy in doing so. And this is where I see the parallels between the left and the Zionist right is the left kind of gave up on winning arguments and they just are like, you're a racist. You're a sexist. I don't know why, but you're just a bad person because I said so. Charlie Kirk's a misogynist. They say, you know, they'll use all these words. That's what the left wing does because they're not able to linguistically win arguments. To me, it's the same thing that the Zionists are doing. They're not able to win these arguments, so they just keep spam the word anti-Semite, and then they take quotes out of context and act like you're being extreme when, like, I mean, I implore people to look at the Joel Pollack quote. He quotes Tucker and he says, I can't believe he said that the American Jewish this is doing this. And he quoted it slightly wrong, like, because there is a committee with that exact name. And it's like Tucker said it literally identically as the name is. And Joel Pollack's trying to act like he's just talking about all Jewish people when it's a specific committee with the name American Jewish Committee. What are you talking about? This? No, that's what you made up to make Tucker look crazy. What Tucker said is an identical actual organization that actually has a Twitter that actually said something that's still there. So are you like, is that their only narrative, to literally constantly lie? I believe there's a way to defend Israel and not lie, but they just can't seem to do that. It's like the left. The left gave up on telling the truth. So then they just use names and words and they just freak out. The Zionists do the same thing. They don't want to talk to Tucker. And here's something too, I think, that Dave Smith said, because all this talk about what Charlie thought and this and that, Dave Smith is a Jewish American who is not a fan of Israel, right? And he's like the premier, besides maybe like Norman Finkelstein or something, but he's like the premier Jewish American who doesn't agree with Israel. He thinks he's America first, or that's what he says. He debated Douglas Murray, right? Douglas Murray is like a Zionist author, and he's like basically, an Israel guy. He's a pro-Israel guy, right? So Dave Smith, the Jewish American Israel critic, debates Douglas Murray, the homosexual, I believe, pro-Israel guy from like England or something. I don't know where he's from. And the debate creates a divide on social media. Most people seem to think that that Dave Smith won the debate. All the Israeli Zionists were saying that Douglas Murray won the debate, right? Charlie Kirk, apparently, this is what Dave said, and he published it. He said that Charlie texted Dave Smith after the debate and said, dude, I don't really disagree with anything you said. Like, Charlie, even though he was pro-Israel, thought that Dave Smith was more right than Douglas Murray. And then he offered to host Dave Smith in a debate, which he did. So it's like, that's a pretty big sign that Charlie, even though he was pro-Israel, he was one of these pro-Israel people that understood that the pro-Israel side is acting insane and they're not right about that much. Like, he didn't text Dave Smith, oh, I agree with Douglas Murray because he's pro-Israel. He texted Dave and was like, dude, I don't disagree with almost anything you said. Like, everything you said was like factually true. I mean, it sucks to lose Charlie in so many ways, but it's like Charlie was the most powerful pro-Israel Zionist that understood that they were acting like leftists in some ways and just calling people names all the time. I don't know what this is. What is Czar? Where are you from, my guy? Thank you for the Czar. I don't even know what that is, but hopefully they convert it to US dollars. But Charlie's trajectory would have ended him in the Oval Office seat eventually. I believe that. His recent tough questions, refusing money and influence young votes, the powers that be couldn't allow that. I mean, I appreciate the super chat. I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but what I will say is I want to see how this all plays out. Like, I want to hear Tyler Robinson speak. I want to see more proof of stuff. They haven't found the bullet, apparently, which obviously there was a bullet, but they haven't talked about that. They have no footage of the actual shooter. I don't think it was one person. I mean, that doesn't seem organic to me. So I don't want to journalistically make any statements, because I think that, there's a lot of people that dislike Charlie Kirk because he was right wing. There's a lot of people who dislike Charlie Kirk from a lot of different angles. So, they seem to have the evidence that this guy was a leftist, but I'm not buying the text messages. I'm not buying the he did it by himself narrative. I think it's weird that there's no footage of it, and I will be patient before I don't want to make any sort of statement of like saying stuff like that. But I appreciate the super chat, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And I'll say this: the timing of it is just the timing is always going to be wild, to be fair, because politics is always wild. But I do think the timing of it was pretty crazy, to say the least. Someone said it's not that the state of Israel is bad. I never said that. It's that the Israeli government that is the problem there, a small independent state because of the Holy Land. You were talking in like crazy capitalizations and stuff, but some people don't like the government there. I don't disagree. Here's what I will say as an American. This is the issue. Whether you like Netanyahu or not, or whether you think the government's corrupt or not, as an American, you should be allowed to say that about your own government or another government. Here's the issue. There's almost no way to criticize the government of Israel without being called an anti-Semite. Like, I don't think everyone in Israel agrees with everything they're doing. And even if they did, you don't have to agree with it. I don't have to agree with my government, regardless. Like, if 90% of people get a vaccine and I don't want to get it, I'm not a bad person because I agree with the majority. But in general, there's almost no way to criticize the government of Israel without being called an anti-Semite. So, I think in order to gain more support for Israel, like, do you think you're allowed to say, I like Israel, but I don't like the government? I'm pretty sure Charlie was saying less than that, and he was getting smeared as an anti-Semite. I don't even think he was publicly saying that he didn't like, I never heard him say he didn't like the government of Israel, and he still get called an anti-Semite. So it's like, if you say, I don't like what Netanyahu's doing, or I don't like what the government's doing, or what the war's doing, you will be smeared as not only an anti-Semite, but blood libel. If I say the American government did something purposely, no one cares. They'll be like, yeah, it's declassified that the American government has done some things purposely that are bad. That's a fact. But if I say it about Israel's government, like they killed a journalist or something, like, overseas, that's anti-Semitism. That's blood libel. Like, they have all these special words where it doesn't matter who you say it about. It doesn't matter if you say it's the government or one person or one organization. All these other entities will jump out and call you an anti-Semite. Tucker Carlson's never said he's against Israel. Tucker Carlson's never said he doesn't like Israel. He likes Israel. He's been to Israel. He just talks about certain organizations. When he does, people jump out of the woodworks and say he's talking about everybody. If he talks about the American Jewish Committee, Joel Pollak comes out and says, oh, what are you talking about? Like, it's like they all defend each other, but then they don't want you to realize that they're all defending each other. And then they'll all lie in unison, but you can't say they're all lying in unison. Not every single person, but like Charlie Kirk was saying, the stakeholders, the people that really are controlling a lot of the conversation, they all work in unison to say you're being extreme when you're talking about specifics. So, I hear what you're saying, but you have to understand, as a journalist or a news analyst or a person, you don't have the ability. Like, they'll say, oh, you can criticize the government. Not really. You can, but you're going to get called an anti-Semite. I guarantee it. Someone said, I heard Mike Huckabee this past Sunday on a Christian channel saying Christians are going to have to pick a side in regards to Israel. Well, luckily, Mike Huckabee's not God and he's not my pastor. So I understand what he's saying. And I think biblically the word Israel is in there a lot, but is it the state? That's a Christian discussion to be had. But, Mike Huckabee can say what he wants and you can agree or disagree with it, Let me see. Read a few more. Someone said, I get called a Hamas supporter, and as a Jewish person for saying I love Jesus Christ is biblical. So you're saying you're Jewish and you get called Hamas supporter for liking Jesus? See, that's crazy. But also beyond crazy, it's like this is the issue in my opinion. I mean, there's bad people and crazy people on all sides, but this is my opinion with the leftists and the Zionists, even though they're different entities. Leftists will call you these names, and then they'll say, if you're this, that justifies somebody doing something to you. They're purposely labeling you and then saying that makes you a target. The Zionists do that as well. Even though you're Jewish, if you're Christian, if they say you're a Hamas supporter, what are they doing overseas to women and children and journalists that they say are Hamas supporters? They're killing them. That's the reality of the war. They're saying, well, that baby was a Hamas. Well, that guy was a Hamas. Well, that journalist was a Hamas. Well, that building was a Hamas. Let's just, everything's Hamas that we say it is. Let's just kill it all. That's what they're doing. I don't know any other way to put it. So it's like, that's why you got to reject these labels completely, because they're doing the same thing that the left is. They say this label basically marks you as a target. That's the reality of the situation. I don't think any label marks somebody as a target. I don't live my life that way. I'm not justifying wars. I'm not justifying death counts. They are. You know what I'm saying? That's just the reality. I understand war is war, but that's the reality of the situation. There's hundreds of journalists that have been slaughtered, and they just say, well, they were working with Hamas. Well, they were Hamas sympathizers. Well, they were that. Okay, so calling someone that now justifies. I've watched people with a lot of power in Republican or just in America in general go on the news and say, well, everyone is essentially guilty there because of the election. And most Fox News boomers are like, yeah, that makes sense. They voted for Hamas. They are Hamas. The election was in the 2000s, like 2006, 2008, 2007. I don't know. It was in the 2000s. And it wasn't this landslide election where everyone in Palestine voted for Hamas. It's not the case at all. Joe Biden won. Does that mean everybody should be a target in America because Joe Biden sucks? Like the fact that, and this is all I'll say, because we're all responsible for what we do, right? We all make mistakes. We're all flawed. We all have sins. But as a Christian, especially, I'll talk to everybody, but as a Christian, if you're getting brainwashed by fake opposition media to think that people should be slaughtered because of an election in the 2000s, God bless you and God bless your rotten soul, because as a Christian, I can't speak for every religion. As a Christian, you're going to say, well, they voted for these people in 2007. Someone 12 years old voted in 2007. Even if they did, they might have voted for, how do you know they voted? The election was like in the 40s to 40. Like it wasn't even a huge landslide. You think that marks them for assassination? Like I would be, just like everyone needs to get right with God. And, I'm certainly not a perfect person. So every day I'm working to get better. That would freak me out if I was so mentally rotten that I was cheering for the assassination of anybody or people, just like the left with Charlie. If you were justifying it because someone on television told you they had an election and you didn't even do the research to realize the election was like 20 years ago, but that makes it okay. Like you're a sick person, That's just the reality of like how media can trick you. The same way a media can trick a leftist into thinking like it's okay what happened to Charlie because of his views. Like it's not okay. And it's beyond not okay. And, you're responsible for your rotting mind and soul if you think that this stuff is okay. So this goes on all sides, but someone said, I saw an old Christian boomer on Facebook this morning joking about the blowing up of buildings. Well, Zionist media will do that to your head for sure. And it's like, they're responsible for what they think and what they say, and may God have mercy on their sick souls. I would never in any country. And some people, to be honest, some people on all sides, I'm not going to act like this is exclusive. There's people on all sides, but I'm not responsible for everyone. I'm responsible for myself. I'm not rooting the controlled demolition of an entire place where tens of thousands of people are dying. I can't morally wrap my head around that. I'm not rooting like in Ukraine and Russia. I'm rooting for the end of the war, for the end of the bloodshed. That's just where my heart and soul leads me. A lot of these boomers are so brainwashed by Zionist media, like they're sickos. You know what I'm saying? That's the reality of it. And they'll just sit on television and cheer this stuff on because they're being told that they're fighting the enemy, and it's like, okay, like that's for you to decide if you're right or not. I'm not your pastor. I'm not your family member, but like you really, I would say at bare minimum, I think you should think about it a little deeper. Like if I'm going to root certain things on, I'm going to definitely do research to try to figure out like what's going on, who's there, etc. I don't have it in me to just like root for something that's sick. Literally never. And if I was somehow going to get to that point, I definitely have to cross-reference the television and be like, what is really going on there? Am I sure that all these people are bad? Is it good for your soul to just root that much destruction in any form? I don't think so. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Appreciate it. Someone said the IDF just marched on Gaza City yesterday. I mean, the reality is that these people in Gaza, they don't have the weapons. They can't win. And, I don't know everything about that, but to me, it's like Israel's going to do what they want, and they're going the distance. Like nobody seems to want to stop them. Nobody is stopping them. Gaza certainly can't stop them. Hamas, like it doesn't even fully make sense to me. Like as far as like they won an election that was forced, like Palestine was forced to have an election. Hamas won. They haven't had an election since. There's all these articles talking about, who's funding them or who's behind them. And then you talk to leaders of Qatar, where Hamas apparently lives, and the leaders of Qatar say that American Israel told them to host Hamas because Hamas was the leadership there, so they were always having negotiations. And you look that up, and factually, it seems to be true. Like America and Israel did ask Qatar to host them. And I don't want to say too much because I don't know everything about it, but every storyline needs a scapegoat. And I'm not saying I like them or trust them. I don't. But who's behind them? Like how according to AI, I asked how many like how many hostages does each side have? According to AI, once again, this is not necessarily true, but it scans the internet and it tells me. They said Hamas has 40 refugees, and I think they should all be released and they should all go home. And Israel has like 10,000. So it's like, can they trade the 10,000 Palestinians or the thousands of Palestinians for the 40? I don't know how these negotiations work. I think Trump's trying to negotiate, but I think what Trump is finding is on one side or the other, or perhaps both sides, they're not really looking for us. The news is saying that's what they want. Sure, I'm sure both sides want their hostages home, but the reality is like you need a reason to do something, and it's like they're going to go all the way. They're going to destroy Gaza. They're going to throw everybody out or kill them, and then they're going to take the land. That's what they're doing. You would think, right, at a certain point, if there was actually a way where like just give the refugees back and they'll stop it, why hasn't Hamas already done that? Shouldn't they have done that? Like, yeah, maybe they're just stupid. Because the thing is, you can't beat Israel at this point in a fight. So why wouldn't you cooperate? But then you're going under the understanding that Israel wants that. Like, let's just say, and like I said, I haven't followed the entire war. Let's just say Hamas says, all right, we'll do it. And then they just say, nah, never mind, or vice versa. It's like everyone that supports Israel is just assuming that Fox News is telling them the truth about every angle, and then people that don't like Israel is listening to someone else on the topic. I don't trust any of these people, but to me, I knew 4 or 5 years ago that Israel was going to take that land. Like they already wanted to take that land. They always were going to take that land, in my opinion. I'm not saying that they didn't have justification or October 7th didn't happen. That's not what I'm saying. I think it did happen, and it was a sick day. But, a sick, sad day. There's a lot of things you can say about it, but it's disgusting. With that being said, how come 5 years ago I thought they were going to take the land? I don't know. Maybe I just thought that. No, because there's all this proof that they were always going to do that. Then a really evil day happened, and now they have the excuse to take the land. And now, because of the hostages, they have an excuse to go as far as they want. So it's like, maybe Hamas is so stupid and evil that they just won't give the 40 people back to stop the war. Some people think that Hamas isn't who people say they are. I don't once again, I have no idea. But also, Palestine being so controlled for so many years and so weak, it's hard for me to assume that Israel doesn't have some sort of leverage over them or didn't ever, because it's like, dude, Israel blew up a bunch of pagers with Hezbollah. Israel's so their intelligence and technology is so advanced that they were able to convince their enemies in Lebanon, that these are pagers that aren't controlled by Israel, and then they all got them, and then they all blew up Hezbollah. Like, they're so smart, they infiltrated Hezbollah. I'm supposed to believe they couldn't infiltrate Hamas over the last 20 years. They don't know who they are or what, it's possible. It's definitely possible that Hamas somehow escaped Mossad and, getting infiltrated. But I believe Mossad is so advanced that I feel like they've infiltrated a lot of things, like to the point where they can infiltrate Hezbollah in Lebanon, but not Palestine. That's been basically under their occupation or control for decades now. It doesn't really make sense to me, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm not going to make claims I can't make, but like the average Fox News boomer, they're just like, yeah, blow up all the buildings and take this back. Like, it's like a storyline that you're following, thinking that there's no other option or solution, when the solution, like, they want the land. They're going to take the land. It's basically controlled demolition on the buildings. So then when they come in and take it, or whoever gets it, they're going to rebuild it, and make it into theirs. And they wanted to do this 5 years ago. They wanted to do this 10 years ago. They wanted to do this 20 years ago. And if they want to do something, they could pretty much do it. That these Middle Eastern countries are no match for them. Hezbollah is not a match for them. I would say Palestine has no chance. Iran it's not that they have a chance. It's just, it would just be so messy if Iran and Israel and America got into a war, because there's so many people in Iran. And also, there's geopolitical, like if you lose Saudi Arabia, if you lose certain of these people, they would know better who's working with who and who's really on whose side. But it seems like, a lot of these other countries are basically like, yeah, we'll let you do that, but don't go further. We'll let you do that to Palestine, but don't do this. I don't know what they can do or they can't do, but I could tell that Trump he doesn't want them to strike Qatar, but they did. And Trump wasn't happy about it, but he can't stop it. He doesn't have the power to stop it or the will to. So, I don't want to talk about this too much, but I think if you really want to know what's going on, you can't just listen to like Fox News or somebody that supports them. And you can't just listen to somebody that's against them. If you really want to get to the core of it, you'd have to do independent research and try to look through the weeds of what's really going on. But I don't even want to talk about it because it's not a topic that is going to matter if I talk about. And clearly, it seems to be the heaviest, hardest topic to talk about. But yeah, like, Hamas led Palestine for 20 years, but they weren't able to infiltrate them in some way, yet they were able to sell Hezbollah pagers. It's possible. It's possible that they outsmarted Israel in some way or something. It's definitely possible. But I don't, like I said, it's hard for me to understand it. We're allies with Qatar. Hamas is in Qatar. Israel wants to attack Hamas in Qatar. Trump doesn't want them to attack Hamas in Qatar, but he lets them do it. It doesn't make sense to me. It's confusing. And then you listen to Qatar and they say, well, Israel and America told us to house Hamas like a decade ago. Are they telling you to now? Like if Trump wanted you to kick him out, wouldn't he kick him out? Like Israel doesn't want him there, but what does Trump like? It's very confusing to the average person. But I think that as time goes on, we'll really figure it out, because now Trump is being put between a rock and a hard place between two allies. He's allies with Qatar. He's allies with Israel. Pro-Israel sycophants in Israel doesn't want Trump to, they hate Qatar. If you listen to any pro-Israel person, they say everyone's being funded by Qatar, 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 Qatar. That's the narrative on the Israel camp, that everything's funded by Qatar. And if you listen to that, you'd assume that Qatar is this massive enemy of the United States of America, but they're an ally, just like Israel's an ally. So Trump wants to be allies with Qatar and Israel, but Israel's trying to push Trump to not be an ally with Qatar. What does that mean? What I said it means. I don't know. Me personally, I'm just watching and observing and talking about it because I know that we have an air base in Qatar, and I know that we've been aligned with Israel, and they're probably our most powerful ally in the world by far. So now the U.S. government's being put in a tough situation, and that this will really show, I think the next coming weeks and months, because this happened a day before Charlie died, by the way, and then like it got overshadowed. But in the next coming weeks and months, the world will reveal all. Like, does Trump have leverage? Is Qatar an ally that Trump respects? If we lose Qatar as an ally, is that going to hurt us in the standing of the rest of the Muslim world? I don't know. But I'm talking about it out loud because I feel like that is a big thing that's happening. And I'm trying to explain it as unbiasedly as I can, regardless of what side you're on, just to be like, this is a moment that will decide a lot, I think, in the Middle East for America. People are talking to each other in the thing. All right, I'm definitely keeping this under 2 hours. I'm not going over 2 hours, but everybody's talking to somebody named Kirk in the comment section, but I'm not, I haven't even seen what he said. John said, I agree with everything you said, 100%. Thank you, John. Once again, sometimes I have opinions that I will preface with, you don't have to agree. What I just said is like sort of not an opinion. Like, even if you're pro-Israel or you're not, like that, this is what's happening. There is a Israel and their people, like as far as like the people in American media that support Israel, like an extreme amount that, in my opinion, essentially like work for them, not literally directly, but it feels that way. They'll start accusing other people of working for Qatar. And the reason is it's the same strategy that they said that Trump was working with Russia, right? Trump wasn't working with Russia, but he was trying to finesse a deal so we didn't go to war with Russia. So all the people that want to start a war with Russia, they say Trump works with Russia. trying to distance Trump from Russia in order to achieve their goals. It's the same thing with Qatar. Is 0 people funded by Qatar? Probably not 0. If every country's funding people, then I would guess someone's being funded by Qatar. But why is the pro-Israel side in the media saying Tucker Carlson? He got Mark Levin for months before Israel attacked Qatar, or Hamas in Qatar. Mark Levin has been calling him Tucker Carlson. And then you have Steve Bannon calling him Tel Aviv Mark or Tel Aviv Levin or something. It's like they're accusing each other of all these things, but it's because this is the divide. You have Americans who think, Qatar is our ally as well. We're not trying to beef with them because we have a military base there. But the pro-Israel side, they want to get America away from Qatar. Personally, I don't think Trump wants to get away from Qatar, but I think Trump is under huge leverage from Israel. So like I said, the next couple of weeks, this will tell you everything you need to know about how much power Trump has. Trump does not want to cut ties with Qatar. The pro-Israel lobby in the media and the pro-Israel side in the media and Israel themselves, they don't want America to have this close of a tie to Qatar. And that's why they've been calling everything Qatar, 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 for the same reason Democrats are calling everything Russia, 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 Russia. And if you notice what I'm saying, I just like the James Lindsays of the world, who's an absolute buffoon, he's trying to coin the term woke right to talk about Tucker Carlson and everybody that realizes what Israel's doing. It's projection. It's to get away with it. The parallels between the left and the pro-Israel side are massive, not necessarily in their domestic beliefs, but in the fact the same way the left says Russia, 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 they say Qatar, 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 for the same reasons. They want to get Trump away from Qatar the same way they were trying to get Trump away from Russia and the American public away from, striking a deal so they couldn't start their war with Ukraine. It's the same thing. The same way that the left calls everyone racist and sexist and xenophobic, the right will call people anti-Semitic. The same way that the left doesn't want to debate Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk, the right doesn't want to debate him either. They don't even want to allow him to host debates. The Zionists are way more similar to leftists than the people that they say are. So like James Lindsay, it's the ultimate projection. Like, you guys are the left. The left is the left. But if anybody has the similarities to them, it's you, but these are the games that people play. And I don't think anybody's really falling for it. Now they're even going after Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh works at the Daily Wire, who is a overwhelmingly pro-Israel publication. Matt Walsh has towed the line on most topics. Not most topics, but definitely this topic. Most topics he hasn't towed the line. But in general, Matt Walsh, once again, it's like Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was pro-Israel way more than Matt Walsh, and they still called him an anti-Semite. Matt Walsh is an isolationist, or at least he's an America firster. Maybe not an isolationist, but Matt Walsh works at a pro-Israel publication but disagrees. And they're calling Matt Walsh a Nazi and an anti-Semite. Like the Zionist right is going after Matt Walsh now. They're never going to be satisfied, because what they want is everyone to do every single thing that they say on every single topic. And if you're Matt Walsh or you're Charlie Kirk, they're not satisfied with compliance on most topics, because there's an agenda out. And the agenda is they don't want America to be questioning certain alliances. They want them to be questioning the alliances they want them to question, right? I think you should be allowed to question Qatar or Israel. But, the Israeli side, they're acting as if Qatar is not an American ally where we have a military base there. But you're allowed to. You don't have to think they're a good ally, and you could think they're bad. But that's just the reality of what's going on. Someone said Erica Kirk will be collecting a nice salary and compensation from TPUSA even after they file net losses with the IRS. Well, I don't know if that's true, but at the end of the day, I don't think Erica Kirk really cares how much money at this point. They've already had a lot of money. They didn't need new money. They were rich enough to live forever and be rich. So you understand what I'm saying? I don't think pointing out the fact that she's making money off Turning Point, you could do that, but do you think she cares about money right now? She already has money. She's rich forever already. You think that's what she wants? Money, not her husband back? I'm pretty sure she cares about her husband, not a dollar that she's getting from Turning Point, or a dollar amount. Someone said we need pro-humanity, pro-peace, hold on, what did I say? Pro-humanity, pro-free speech, and pro-affordable food, housing, and lives, which could be done. Plenty of resources. It's a whole nother topic, but yeah, no, the government has the ability to help, but in order, and I don't want to take too much time because I'm keeping this under 2 hours, but anytime you help someone, you have to do it strategically. And right now, we are international socialists, right? We are basically globalist socialists. We are socialists for Israel. We are socialists for Ukraine. We're socialists for the Congo and all these random countries. And also, in some ways, American socialists, where they're giving Social Security, et cetera. But everything that they're doing, in my opinion, internationally, I don't think we should be giving anybody money. Domestically, if you're going to do any sort of government programs, they have to be strategic. I could do an hour rant. I'm not going to do it on homelessness. Homelessness is not a money issue, and homelessness is not a home issue. It's like, oh, there's so many homes. Elon Musk could solve homelessness. No, he couldn't. He couldn't. Elon Musk could give $50 billion and solve homelessness. He could not. I guarantee you Elon Musk could send $50 billion to somebody and it still wouldn't end, because it's not just a housing and money issue. It's a mental health issue. It's a societal issue. It's a drug issue in many ways. And it's also an enforcement issue. If you spend $50 billion and build every house in the world, but you don't force people to get off the streets, they're not going to get off the streets. I know this because I used to do interviews with homeless people in Los Angeles just to see where they're at. Multiple homeless people I talked to said, I could go home at any point. I just don't want to. I could get off the street if I wanted to. I got somewhere to go. I got my cousin's house to go to, but I got to stop doing drugs and I don't want to do drugs. Like, they would just tell me this stuff. They didn't care. So it's the same thing with social programs. American social programs, for the most part, are stupid. They're like giving people money. They're forcing low income in a lot of apartments. So then people from all over just can live at, like, they're doing it in ways that don't make any sense. So a lot of neighborhoods are getting worse. The bad neighborhoods are not necessarily getting better. In some cases they are, but it's just like, you have to give with the wisdom of, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So they have to make sure people aren't scamming the social programs, which they're not doing. So the government could help in some ways, but they have to teach men how to fish, not just keep giving men a fish. And what they're doing is giving men fish, giving women fish, giving divorced wives fish. So they never want to fish, and they just take. There's millions of people taking government money that they don't need. There's millions of people that the government money is stopping them from being a productive citizen in the world, and they have no incentive to do so. So, nobody's really looking into it fully, but I think it takes a lot of resources and ambition that a lot of people don't have. And I don't think it's a popular thing to do politically, because the risk reward ratio is not there from screwing people over, or at least trying to fix it, and people will perceive it as getting screwed over. So, definitely America has the wealth and the resources. This is why certain left-wing people turn left-wing, because it is true. It's like, if California has the third or fourth biggest economy in the world, why does California look the way it looks? It's not a money issue. It's a greed issue. It's a moral issue. It's a soul issue. The left is right about that. They're just wrong about the solutions. The solutions are not necessarily what they think. And you can't just throw money at everything. Like, imagine you just give people money for no reason, or just give them money and say, you're going to be a good person because you have money. That's not true. You have to provide a society that rewards good Samaritans, that rewards work, that rewards morality, and disincentivizes immorality. But right now, we live in a sick world. Everything is a scam. Health insurance is a scam. Car insurance is a scam. Hospitals are a scam. I'm not saying they don't do anything right, but like, the whole world is based on the most greedy, soulless people are making billions, and good people just get stomped over by lawyers and a bunch of insurance scams. That's the world we live in. So a real leader that actually cared, that had actual, I would say, ambition, would have to look at everything and just reorganize everything. But nobody's going to do that, because I don't think they even have that sort of mindset. They're just, and Trump, he does do some good things, but at the end of the day, he's a businessman. The reason he talks about I'm building a ballroom, it's because he's a powerless puppet, and the only thing he can do is build a ballroom, and he likes to build. It's like throwing a kid in a sandbox. Go build a sand thing. I'm building. Yeah, because you can't stop the war in Ukraine because your masters won't let you. Okay, but you're building a ballroom. Who cares? That, like, why don't you build something for the American people? Building a ballroom. I'm not saying Trump's doing nothing, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like, unfortunately, that's all he can do. With that being said, yeah, there's ways to do social programs in America that helps, but it would have to be the enforcement and the strategy essentially to put them there, give people something, but make sure people aren't abusing it and make sure it leads people to eventually being able to feed themselves off the government, not giving someone a fish to just sit there for 50 years, which they're doing in a lot of ways. It's hard to do, but it also requires like someone caring. And I don't know that we're there yet. Maybe we'll be there eventually. But yeah, no, we have the wealth to fix a lot of issues. But I'll end on this note. It's the same as the left versus right. You could say it's a policy issue, but it's a mental and a spiritual issue. There's nothing you can do to heal a nation. There's no amount of money. And America's the perfect situation. We have a first world economy with a third world crime because it's deeper than money. It's deeper than economy. It's deeper than whether Nvidia has a lot of stock money or not. It's a spiritual issue. And when you have millions of people that are spiritually rotting, wicked people, you're going to have a wicked country. And to me, yeah, homelessness is an issue, but it's not a money or a housing issue, as crazy as that sounds. It's a spiritual issue. It's a mental issue. And it's an enforcement issue. If you build 1,000 houses, but you tell them they don't have to go there and they can go there only if they stop doing drugs, people that want to do drugs on the street will do drugs on the street. Just take the resources and sit there. That's what they're doing. I've studied homelessness more than most people. In California, they build a homeless facility and homeless grows. How is it growing? How is this neighborhood shittier? Because they gather for the resources. There's no enforcement. There's a bunch of social workers who can't do jack. Give them the stuff, and then they go back out on the streets with all the stuff they just got. They don't care. They don't want to get off the streets. They don't want to follow the rules. You have to make them follow the rules. We'll give you all this stuff, but you have to follow the rules. We'll give you all these resources. We'll give you help. We'll give you mental help, but you got to get off it. You can't just squat in this park. It's illegal now. You will be enforced. You have to provide help with enforcement. If I'm going to hire somebody for my business or contract work with them, you think I'm just going to say, here's $500. Who cares what you do? That's the government. No, it's like, here's $500. You have to do something or else I'm not going to work with you again. You know that you have to provide value. I'm not going to be that big of a dick about it, but there needs to be an exchange and there needs to be value and it needs to work. And if it doesn't, then it ends. You know, that's how government programs should be. And this is the main part that a lot of leftists don't understand. And even some people on the right. Enforcement. You have to enforce it. You cannot allow people to just do literally anything. I mean, you can, but it's like, well, they could just live in the park if they want and destroy the park and take poops in the park. Why? Why can they just take poops in the park? If you want a nation that doesn't have massive crime and doesn't have feces everywhere, you have to say it's unacceptable to do that. And you get rewarded for cleaning the park, not for shitting in the park. But right now it's like you could shit in a park and get money. And then you can't even clean the park because it's not safe to do so. And there's no incentive to do so because you don't have like the government backing behind you necessarily. So, you know, long conversation. Appreciate you guys. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. God bless the world. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for allowing me to do what I do. And yeah, I'll be back with more videos soon. I just wanted to weigh in on the Jimmy Kimmel stuff. And once again, I just want to say, I would not say that I'm not the gatekeeper of whether you celebrate or not. Jimmy Kimmel is garbage, but just keep your eyes on where they go with this because what they say and what they do are two different things. And listening to Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, etc., they're showing that they are willing to censor when it comes to certain topics. And there's enough evidence over the last week from Kash Patel, the conversation he had with Jared Moskowitz, that's on Twitter. And also, if you want to look that up, and just Pam Bondi on her, you know, if you want to listen to the full context, you could listen to her whole, I think it was with Stephen Miller's wife or something. But like they're telling us where they want to go with this. And I'm not asking people to freak out. And I'm not asking people to like panic and, you know, take a win. If it's a win, dude, take a win. I don't care. Don't stress about it, but don't get caught in this like, oh man, we got them because the right media is crushing. Dude, the Republican media is not really Republican media. And the people running the Trump administration do not share the same values as you. So just keep an eye on it. And as far as Jimmy Kimmel, I'm sure he'll start a podcast that nobody will listen to. And, you know, it's like he'll move on, but we'll see. appreciate you guys. God bless you. I'll be back soon, and I appreciate your support.